I'm Andrew Flushy, and I'm your Virginia traffic attorney, here to wish you a happy St. Patrick's Day. Before you go out and celebrate this holiday, you need to keep three things in mind. First of all, designate a driver ahead of time. You'd be surprised how many people end up with a DUI after claiming to only have had 2 drinks. Now, sometimes people are underestimating the amount of alcohol they consumed, but sometimes people end up with a beer or a glass of wine that's bigger than they thought it would be. You know, different restaurants have 22-ounce beers, and 2 22-ounce beers is 44 ounces. That is a ton more than 2 long necks that you might drink at home. You know, a regular bottled beer is 12 ounces, which is going to be only 24. So 44 ounces is way more than the 24 that you might normally be used to drinking and then driving perhaps safely. The other thing to keep in mind in this regard is that there's no official line where you're immune from DUI. .08 is the line where the Commonwealth kind of has their case made if you blow a .08 or higher. It's much easier for them to prove their case. But if you blow a .07 or .06, you certainly can be charged with DUI, and in some jurisdictions like Stafford, you very well may be charged with DUI, and you have an uphill road to fight to get out of that situation. So if you're going to be drinking anything more than a single drink, you definitely should not be driving, and you need to have a designated driver ahead of time. Don't worry, don't figure that out when you get to the bar or the restaurant. Figure that out before you leave home. The second thing to keep in mind is that if you're stopped and under investigation for a DUI, is that you can refuse roadside tests in Virginia. Now, this doesn't apply for every state, but in Virginia, when the officer says, "Oh, sir, you've had something to drink, why don't you step out and do some tests just to make sure you're safe to drive home," you can refuse those tests. And quite honestly, if you know that you've had anything more than 1 drink, it may be a good idea to refuse those tests politely. Now, if the officer arrests you for DUI and says we're going to take you to the station or to the hospital for a breath or blood test there, then you need to do that test or you could be charged with unreasonable refusal. The third thing to keep in mind is to think about where you're going to be celebrating if you're going to be drinking. Some venues have outdoor areas where you can drink, or you may go out for a smoke or something. Keep in mind that it's illegal in Virginia to drink in public. Now, that's kind of a loaded word. What does public mean? Different bars, they'll have signs up, no alcohol beyond this point. And that is important legally because that's signifying that if you cross that boundary, like perhaps it's on the deck, and if you step outside the deck area of the bar, you could be charged with drinking in public because now you're outside the ABC licensed area to have that alcohol. And the same thing could apply if you're at some type of outdoor celebration. Here in Fredericksburg, we have a big St. Patrick's Day parade where the Blue and Gray Brewery does beer and everything for people. It's a lot of fun, but keep in mind where you're supposed to be drinking, because if you're outside the drinking area, then you could be charged with drinking in public, which is actually a misdemeanor. So you don't want to get in any kind of trouble like that. So have a great St. Patrick's Day, but be sure to always keep safe when you're celebrating any holiday, especially if alcohol is involved.